Welcome into Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. I'm Jonathan Acosta filling in for John Scott today, who's enjoying some much-deserved rest on this Bills bye week after Vic witnessing that train wreck of a performance in Atlanta on Monday night. I'm joined here by the Hall of Famer, Vic Carucci. Vic, a nice time for this bye week to arrive, I think.
I think a perfect time in many ways. Now, you heard Josh Allen after the game say, yeah, he didn't really love the idea of this sitting not so well on the stomachs of this entire team and stewing about it, so to speak. I get that. But honestly, after not just one, but two losses in a row and the ugliness of that game, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity to have some extended time to regroup.
With no Bills game to look forward to this upcoming week, and tonight's show may be a little bit more of an evaluation of where the Bills stand right now. And before we get to that, let's just take a look at how these first 6 weeks have gone on the schedule. Here you see it on your screen so far. Obviously, the Bills got off to a hot start with those 4 wins in a row, that primetime win against the Ravens, setting the table for the next 4 weeks until the last 2 weeks in primetime have arrived and have really sort of revealed some of the warts with this Bills team.
Yeah, and I think as we look back on this, Jonathan, and this is what happens when you lose 2 games in a row, you start thinking more about some of the previous games and were there some telltale signs of what we have seen these past couple of games, and I think there were, for sure. Obviously, the Baltimore game, crazy game, hard to really analyze that as anything but an anomaly, the way it unfolded and the odds of how the Bills pulled it off, and the great fourth quarter, that might have been the fourth quarter of a lifetime for them. But after that, yes, cruising as they did against the Jets team that doesn't show up. What does that really tell you about yourself? Not a lot. But then it's Miami and then it's New Orleans. And in both of those games, there are moments, more than a few, where on both sides of the ball, you had some questions about how this team was functioning, performing. And then I know we saw in the New England game and especially that Atlanta game, some of those trouble spots that were showing up in victory then came to fruition in bad losses.
The loss after New England, the quote from Josh Allen was that it was a wake-up call because they had sort of skated by with their performances against Miami and New Orleans, and it finally cost them against the Patriots. So, as you mentioned, these last 2 losses sort of bringing some of those issues to light now. And I think for a large part of this year, we had talked about the Bills' defense being the main issue. But these last 2 weeks, it's really been the offense that has let the Bills down. They go from scoring over 30 points per game to just 17 points per game the last 2 weeks. And I think if we were to look at one trouble issue on that side of the ball, Vic, I think it has to start with their pass catchers.
It does, and you're right. I mean, the fact that offense is a problem makes it an entire team problem because this Bills team, this just in, if it's going to win games, more games than not, it's going to win them because of the offense. I mean, that's what we're believing right along, right? That's how they're built. That's how they're structured. I know effort was made in the offseason, especially through the draft and some in free agency, and I know we're going to get into some of this, to make that defense stronger, better. That was the area of need. And why was there so much attention on the defensive side? Because the belief was, on the part of Brandon Beane, that the offense would carry the day. We're not seeing that. We're seeing struggles, and many that raise multiple questions. So let's start with that receiving core. Keon Coleman is supposed to be a number 1 guy. He looks anything but that. He's struggling badly. We talked last year about how much he was struggling to get open, and these numbers tell a real stark story. That first week against Baltimore, and most of this being in the fourth quarter of the Baltimore game, where he has 112 yards and a touchdown. And now look, in 5 games, we're talking about a guy almost getting just above the total that he had in mostly 1 quarter of the first game. That's rough, and that's the kind of thing that is, I think, emblematic of the entire group, where you don't see others really stepping up in this group. And yes, Khalil Shakir got a new contract. Still love his game, but his game is a lot more effective when others are stepping up in a bigger way. Josh Palmer, Curtis Samuel. Okay, Palmer they were trying, I guess, to get him more involved in this game against Atlanta. He gets hurt. That's unfortunate. But Curtis Samuel, 3 times a healthy scratch. So what's the issue there? I just get the sense, as we did last year prior to the trading deadline, and Amari Cooper shows up then, where is it? Like, what's going to lift this team? What is going to lift this offense? And the answer last year, and the answer is this year, well, Josh Allen will just do his thing and help him out. But much more is needed than that.
And the person who all of this falls on their shoulders to get this figured out is Joe Brady, right?
Yeah.
Last year, they bring in Amari Cooper. We saw these midseason struggles have been a thing with this Bills team. We saw it 2 seasons ago. Around the same time, it leads to the firing of Ken Dorsey. Joe Brady comes in, does well on an interim basis. Last year, we saw these struggles, ugly performances against Baltimore and Houston. They trade for Amari Cooper, and Joe Brady has his team back to scoring over 30 points per game. It seems like right now, he has a little bit of midseason adjustments to do. It feels a lot like they try to go with that everybody eats offense that was working well for them last year, and it hasn't necessarily carried over to this year. And I think 2 main issues stick out when you look at the job that Joe Brady is doing right now. First off, the lack of an offensive identity, where you see sometimes where the Bills, they want to be a run team with James Cook, and they lean on that certain games. They want to be a pass team with Josh Allen, the MVP, throwing to the wide receivers. They need to settle on an identity, and then also the cute play calling that Sean McDermott has commented on the past 2 weeks.
Well, it is a massive challenge to ask any offensive coordinator, Joe Brady or anyone else, to figure out how to make an everybody eats mentality or approach work effectively. It sounds great. It's a nice catchphrase, but I fundamentally, you're a better receiving core when you have a true number 1 guy. That's always been, I think, the case as long as you've looked at football. And the best and most effective teams offensively are that. Yes, I know there were numbers that argued the opposite of that last year. I know Brandon Beane took issue with the idea that this team needed something better than this everybody eats sort of ordinary guys that Josh Allen will elevate. But it is a problem, and it's this guy's problem primarily. Back to your point about the use of James Cook. And, for 3 consecutive games after that opener, James was the guy. He was carrying that load, and the offense was running through him, and it was quite effective to see those numbers and what he was doing. But then, from the standpoint of the last couple of games, especially the New England game where you hardly saw him after 3 straight of pretty effective running, and then the Baltimore game, the Atlanta game where yes, the numbers are better, and in the second half of that game, you're seeing him get the ball, and it feels like, Joe, okay, this is going to get you traction. It's going to give the offense traction, and then boom, the lights go out on that with 11 or so minutes left.
No touches in the last 10 minutes or so.
It doesn't add up. It seems like you use the right term. Like this team is struggling to find an identity. What are you? If you want to be a multiple offense, that's okay, but something has to be your foundation. I think number 4 in the offensive line should be at the core of that. And if anything gets you back on track as an offense, it should lead right there. I don't know if Joe necessarily is seeing it that way. And I also wonder if Joe also feels that somehow, some way, the MVP quarterback has to be a bigger part of what they're doing. And are things being forced there? Because against a blitz-happy, wonderfully schemed defense that the Falcons had that befuddled him the whole way, he was lost. And he never really ever got back on track.
We can't talk about these Bills issues without the defense, right? The comment from Joe Brady after the game was, when the team holds another team to 21 points, they should be able to go and win that game. This defense hasn't really seemed capable of that at a lot of different points this season, although the point totals say otherwise. You look at the yardage totals, this defense has not played up to the Bills' standard. A lot of heat coming the way of Bobby Babich, questions whether Sean McDermott should take over defensive play calling duties. He said he hasn't considered that yet so far. Vic, I think we both agree when we look at the 11 guys on the field for this defense, the main concern seems to be in the back end.
It is, and I don't know how fixable that really is at this stage. I think that's something that had to be fixed in the biggest way in the offseason. Now, yes, they invested a number 1 draft pick in a cornerback, Max Hairston, who is still dealing with a knee injury, and we'll see about him coming back and how effective he is when he comes back. But on the back end, the safety position, and you look at Taylor Rapp, you look at Cole Bishop, I'm sorry, it's not there. It's not something I see. Rapp did make an amazing play and hustle to deny the Drake London touchdown that would have possibly turned the Monday night game into a blowout if he had gotten that touchdown before the half. So credit that. But in general, looking at Tre'Davious White here, what is his stature and status as a corner at this stage of his career after a couple of major injuries and aging? And age is not a friend, especially at the speed positions, the skill positions like cornerback. And then on the other side, Christian Benford, how well has he played in general? He's had moments, but he hasn't looked like the guy that we were classifying as one of the better corners in the league.
It's a Bills run defense that ranks 30th in the NFL right now, giving up over 156 yards per game, something they're going to have to clean up when they play their first game out of the bye against Carolina, and a guy who's looked like the second coming of Walter Payton and Rico Dowdle the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting matchup for the Buffalo Bills down in Carolina. And plenty more to talk about with the Bills later on in this show. Also plenty to talk about with the Sabres. 8 goals last night in their first win. Is that a sign of good things to come? We'll discuss with our Paul Hamilton, who joins the show coming up right after the break here on Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. Hey there, welcome back. This is Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. Joining me now here is our Sabres insider, Paul Hamilton. We just got done talking about a couple of the issues with the Bills. Going into last night, maybe this seemed like this was going to be sort of a negative Sabres segment too, until all of a sudden they sort of pop out for 8 goals last night against Ottawa, more goals than all of the other games combined this season, Paul. And before we get into this discussion, let's just take a quick look at this first week of the Sabres season. We're done with the first week of the Sabres season, so let's take a quick look, a reminder of the results so far. An ugly start to the season before they got things back on track last night against the Senators.
All I'll say as we look at that is the Sabres are very, very consistent. I said this to you last year.
Yes.
The Sabres are extremely consistent at being inconsistent.
Yeah, that's correct.
And here we are, a very inconsistent. And most of those games that you're looking at were 1-goal games for most of the game. As poorly as the Sabres played, they could have won any of the 3. And the Boston game didn't become a 2-goal game till 3 seconds were left when they finally got the empty netter. So Buffalo could have pulled the goaltender and gotten points out of that game. And that's something they have to learn to do, is when they don't have their A game, learn how to get points out of it anyway. They didn't do it in any of those games, despite, for the most part, them being 1-goal games. But yeah, they did not play well at all. They didn't deserve to win those hockey games. They didn't work hard enough to win those hockey games. They didn't play fast enough to win those hockey games. What they did do is get good goaltending to win those hockey games. We'll talk about that later, but it was a total turnaround when they got to the second period against the Ottawa Senators. They want to play like that for the last 40 minutes like they did against Ottawa, they can beat anybody.
And let's talk about that Ottawa game, because the comment that stuck out from that 3-game losing streak was Lindy Ruff in Boston saying that it was some of the worst compete level he had seen. Total opposite in that second period against Ottawa. They kill a couple of penalties. The PK has been one of the strengths for the Sabres team this season, and then it really seemed to energize them and help the floodgates open in that 8-goal performance.
Well, Lindy talked about he wanted to see speed against Ottawa, and he got that in the last 40 minutes. They were flying. That's why McLeod all of a sudden showed up and scored a couple of goals, because he was using his speed, something he wasn't doing in the first 3 games. They were around the net. Well, who's around the net? Zach Benson and Doan. Well, Doan had been playing, but Zach Benson had not been. So they needed to be harder on battles. They needed to be harder around the net. They needed to get around the net. Well, who does that almost the best on the team? Zucker and Benson, and now Doan. They're
and Alex
the ones
Tuch scored net front also.
So now it's contagious. There's Alex Tuch screening the goaltender, picks up a rebound, scores a goal. So they used their speed. They were going to the net, and it really resulted in some very, very good play. And again, anytime they want to play like that, injuries don't matter when they play like that. That's winning hockey. That's the type of hockey that wins hockey games. Even when in the third period, where they opened the third period with a 3-goal lead, Ottawa scored twice, bang, bang. Mm-hmm. They could have panicked and been done. Lindy Ruff very wisely called timeout just to calm them down. Say, look, you guys look like you don't want the puck. Want the puck. 17 seconds later, Alex Tuch comes flying up the wing. McLeod comes flying down the slot. Tuch puts a perfect pass to him. It's in the net, and they're off and running again.
So that performance begs the question, A, why don't we see this more often from the Sabres? But really, B, now with 1 week down in the season, how much of this is translatable? How much of this can we see going forward? Was this a mirage? Or do the 3 losses speak more to who this Sabres team is in that one win we saw last night against Ottawa?
Well, you would think they're going to do it more often, because they're going to feel good about themselves when they do, because they are going to get more points. There's just no question. Had they played like that in any one of those 3 losses, they would have gotten some wins. They would not have been 0-3. And they played that way in all 3 games. They possibly could have been 3-0, 2-0-1 probably with the goaltending they got, or 3-0. And
you bring up the goaltending. Alex Lyon, maybe the best player on this Sabres team through the first 4 games. Is he playing at a rate to where it's going to be hard for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to just slide back into that number 1 role when he comes back from injury?
Absolutely he is. And he had a .919 save percentage in the first 3 games. If you have a goaltender at .919, you should be 3-0, not 0-3, or 2-0-1. You should not be 0-3. That is an excellent, that would be at the top of the league, .919. He was standing on his head. So I've always said, tell me if they're going to get goaltending, and they probably are going to play winning hockey. Well, they proved me wrong there, because they got great goaltending and lost all 3 games. To me, they wasted 3 good games of goaltending there.
And Paul, a lot of the focus this offseason was being tougher to play against and getting better defensively. Well, again, the PK, 93.8%, third in the NHL right now. And then you talk about the compete. You get a guy like Zach Benson back in the lineup from injury, and Josh Doan really looks like a good player that they got in that J.J. Peterka trade.
They did, and that's what they need more of, is guys like Benson and Doan who are going to compete like that. Why did they score 3 power play goals after they went 0-for-11 in the first 3 games? Because they won battles. They went to the battles. They went to the net, and were able. Now, yes, Ottawa's not a good penalty-killing team. Still, they had to still go out and score the goals. Those are the types of goals that you need. That's the way you have to work on the power play. Now, they had killed off their first 13 penalties and have only given up one power play goal all year long. So I think they're 16-17 on the penalty kill. So they are doing the things necessary. They are working hard on the penalty kill, and they were working hard on the power play in last night's game. So those are the things that, you know, special teams can win you hockey games. And if they can get that power play going on a consistent basis, they will win some hockey games.
It's funny how one game can change the picture of things, because after that loss to Colorado, the sky is falling. Tage Thompson telling the media, hey, you guys are talking like the sky is falling. It's just 3 games. Then here they come out with an 8-goal performance against the Senators, and all of a sudden it seems like there's new life into this team. The power play, which you mentioned, was 0 for 11. Now after that game, they're ranked 13th in the NHL. That doesn't sound so bad, right? So now they look ahead to Saturday with the defending Cup champion Florida Panthers coming into town. Paul, we expect a pretty good environment at KeyBank Center. For
Great test. I think it's good that Florida's coming in, because now can you build on what you just did against the Ottawa Senators? If you play that way, you have a good chance of beating Florida. Last year they beat Florida 5-2. It was their only win in the first 6 games. So, and Florida has now lost their last 2 going into action. They will have played a game before they play Buffalo. But still, if you play like that, they have a good chance. So I'm very, very intrigued to see how they're going to come out against the Florida Panthers.
The biggest thing we talked about at the beginning of this segment, consistency. Can they build off this past performance and come out and do it again against Florida? If they can, get a win there, you end this homestand 2-1, 2 wins in 3 games. That will certainly be something that would pay off for this team going down the road. Coming up now in our final segment, Vic comes back in for Paul as we look at the landscape of the AFC East, a picture that has changed the last 2 weeks, plus maybe some good news on the horizon for the Bills. That's next on Sports Talk Live, Buffalo Plus. Welcome back into Sports Talk Live Buffalo Plus. Vic Carucci back joining me here for this final segment. Vic, you know what no Bills football this weekend means? A chance to just throw on Red Zone, throw on NFL Sunday Ticket, and be able to sort of sit back and comfortably watch some of the other action.
Love it. I love it. I mean, I obviously it's, you know, we do our jobs, we cover the Bills, but Red Zone and the chance to kind of get a good look or you know, snapshots of other teams in the league is wonderful.
Specifically the AFC East, right? With the Bills not playing this weekend, I think Bills Mafia really going to tune in to see what the other teams, not just in the AFC at large, but really in this division, are going to be going to be doing. Especially because the Bills find themselves not in first place in the division anymore.
Right.
Here's the Sunday slate. The first place Patriots, it's the return of Mike Vrabel to Tennessee. They take on the 1-5 Titans. That game's at 1 o'clock. The Dolphins taking on the Browns in a battle of maybe the not so great teams in the AFC. That game also Sunday at 1 o'clock. And then maybe particular attention also to the Jets hosting the Carolina Panthers, the team that the Bills play coming out of the bye week.
Yeah, obviously, I think these second two games will get the most focus. There will be more Titans fans in Western New York and in the Bills fan base than ever, obviously. And then as far as Carolina, that'll be the scouting game. That'll be the one to just see how this team, what's the state of that team now. And I don't know how much of a gauge you get against the Jets. Jets are pretty bad.
And so the Bills right now in second place in the AFC East as we take a look at the standings. There is a chance that they find themselves back in first place without playing a game, depending on what happens in Tennessee. We think the likelihood, though, is that the Patriots pick up a win there and then would have half a game lead numerically over the Bills in the division. Obviously, both the Bills and the Patriots sort of separating themselves from the rest of the division in terms of Miami and New England. The Bills have 3 games left against the AFC East, at Miami, at New England, and at home against the Jets. And Vic, maybe a little bit of good news during this bye week and even looking ahead to next week is that this team is set to get back a few pieces defensively.
Yeah, I think the suspensions that are up for Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi are huge in terms of the getting fresh legs and just the fresh bodies and maybe better talent to the middle of this defense to help against the run. Especially Michael Hoyt, watching him in the preseason, watching him in training camp, he grabbed attention with the energy that he brought to the table. Sean McDermott talked about that. Now, it's been a while since these